Alright, shall we dive back into the world of Avonlea and see what they're going to do now that they've got some proper funding for shingling the community center?
Let us do it. Will you do me the honors of beginning?
Certainly. Chapter 7, The Pointing of Duty. Anne leaned back in her chair one mild October evening and sighed. She was sitting at a table covered with textbooks and exercises, but the closely written sheets of paper before her had no apparent connection with the studies or schoolwork. "What's the matter?" asked Gilbert, who had arrived at the open kitchen door just in time to hear the sigh. Anne colored and thrust her writing out of sight under some school compositions. "Nothing very dreadful. I was just trying to write out some of my thoughts, as Professor Hamilton advised me, but I couldn't get them to please me. They seem so still and foolish directly they're written down on white paper with black ink. Fallacies are like shadows. You can't cage them, they're such wayward, dancing things. But perhaps I'll learn the secrets someday if I keep on trying. I haven't a great many spare moments, you know. By the time I finish correcting school exercises and compositions, I don't always feel like writing any of my own." "You are getting on splendidly in school, Anne. All of the children like you," said Gilbert, sitting down on the stone step. "No, not all. Anthony Pye doesn't and won't like me. What is worse, he doesn't respect me. No, he doesn't. He simply holds me in contempt, and I don't mind confessing to you that it worries me miserably. It isn't that he is so very bad. He's only rather mischievous, but no worse than some of the others. He seldom disobeys me, but he obeys with a scornful air of toleration as if it wasn't worthwhile disputing the point where he would, and it has a bad effect on the others. I've tried every way to win him, but I'm beginning to fear I never shall. I want to, for he's a rather cute little lad, if he is a Pye, and I could like him, if he'd let me." "Probably it's merely the effect of what he hears at home."
Anthony Pye rhymes with bad guy. I agree, Necromancer.
Aww. Oh, Anthony is a Jerk actually got censored by Twitch on me.
What?
Yep, it just straight up asterisks across the board. I'm like, what on earth is Necromancer saying? No, apparently it's Anthony is a jerk.
Yes.
Oh, you'd probably hate him more if you knew who he was. So he is the younger brother of a girl who did not get along well with Anne when Anne was going to school. The two of them were schoolmates, and the whole Pye family really isn't particularly on good terms with any of Anne Shirley's friends and relations, as far as I can tell.
They got a bad rep.
Yeah. At the same time, I think it really kind of came to a head when they were going to college together. Mm-hmm. And or finishing school, I guess. And Josie was just an absolute turd the entire time. Even as Anne was trying to be nice and make amends. But this is particularly difficult for Anne because she's decided she doesn't want to use corporal punishment as part of her teaching process. Mm-hmm. And so, despite the fact that she's got, this kid who is being absolutely dreadful to her, she really wants to make sure that she's doing her best to inspire young minds without the use of violence, which pretty darned good intention as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Not altogether. Anthony is an independent little chap and makes up his own mind about things. He has always gone to men before, and he says girls' teachers are no good. Well, we'll see what patience and kindness will do. I like overcoming difficulties, and teaching is really very interesting work. Paul Irving makes up for all that is lacking in the others. That child is a perfect darling, Gilbert, and a genius into the bargain. I'm persuaded the world will hear of him someday," concluded Anne in a tone of conviction. "I like teaching too," said Gilbert. "It's good training, for one thing. Why, Anne, I've learned more in the weeks I've been teaching the young ideas of White Sands than I had learned in all the years I went to school myself. We all seem to be getting on pretty well. The Newbridge people like Jane, I hear, and I think White Sands is tolerably satisfied with your humble servant, all except Mr. Andrew Spencer. I met Mrs. Peter Balut on my way home last night, and she told me she thought it her duty to inform me that Mr. Spencer didn't approve of my methods. Have you ever noticed, Anne said reflectively, that when people say it is their duty to tell you a certain thing, you may prepare for something disagreeable? Why is it they never seem to think it a duty to tell you the pleasant things they hear about you? Mrs. H.B. Donnell called at the school again yesterday and told me she thought it her duty to inform me that Mrs. Harmon Andrews didn't approve of my reading fairy tales to the children, and that Mr. Rogerson thought Prilly wasn't coming on fast enough in arithmetic. If Prilly would spend less time making eyes at the boys over her slate, she might do better. I feel quite sure that Jack Gillis works her class sums for her, though I've never been able to catch him red-handed. Have you succeeded in reconciling Mrs. Donnell's hopeful son to his saintly name? Yes, but it was really a difficult task. At first, when I called him St. Clair, he would not take the least notice until I'd spoken 2 or 3 times, and then, when the other boys nudged him, he would look up with such an aggrieved air as if I'd called him John or Charlie, and he couldn't be expected to know I meant him. So I kept him in after school one night and talked kindly to him. I told him his mother wished me to call him St. Clair, and I couldn't go against her wishes. He saw it when it was all explained out. He's really a very reasonable little fellow. And he said that I could call him St. Clair, but he'd lick the stuffing out of any boys that tried it. Of course, I had to rebuke him again for using such shocking language. Since then, I call him St. Clair, and the boys call him Jake and Olga Smiley. He informs me that he means to be a carpenter, but Mrs. Donnell says I am to make a college professor out of him. The mention of college gave a new direction to Gilbert's thoughts, and they talked for a time of their plans and wishes, gravely, earnestly, hopefully, as youth loves to talk, while future is yet an untrodden path full of wonderful possibilities. Gilbert had finally made up his mind that he was going to be a doctor. "It's a splendid profession," he said enthusiastically. "A fellow has to fight something all through life. Didn't somebody once define man as fighting animal? And I want to fight disease and pain and ignorance, which are all members of one another. I want to do my share of honest, real work in the world, Anne. Add a little to the sum of human knowledge that all the good men have made accumulating since it began. The folks who lived before me have done so much for me, and I want to show my gratitude by doing something for the folks who will live after me. It seems to me that is the only way a fellow can get square with his obligations to the race." "I'd like to add some beauty to life," said Anne dreamily. "I don't exactly want to make people know more, though I know that is the noblest ambition. But I'd love to make them have a pleasanter time because of me, to have some little joy or happy thought that would never have existed if I hadn't been born." "I think you're fulfilling that ambition every day," said Gilbert admiringly. Aww.
Blush, blush.
That's adorable. Gilbert is awesome. He is awesome in this book. Like, he's totally made up for calling her carrots. And he was
I'm
right.
still hoping he's got some snarkiness in him. And he does. He definitely
he's
does.
Got snark. He just doesn't turn it on Anne.
No. He knows better.
And he was right. Anne was one of the children of light by birthright. After she had passed through a life with a smile or a word thrown across it like a gleam of sunshine, the owner of that life saw it, for the time being at least, as hopeful and lovely and of good reports. And we're still using Full Metal Alchemist as the stinger?
Always.
Full Metal Alchemist.
Full Metal Alchemist. Finally, Gilbert rose regretfully. "Well, I must run up to McPherson's. Moody Spurgeon came home from Queens today for Sunday, and he was bringing me out a book Professor Boyd is lending me. And I must get Marilla's tea. She went to see Mrs. Keith this evening, and she'll be soon back. Soon be back." Let me turn on a light here. There we go.
Oh, there we go. Satil becoming one of those children of light with the click of the wall socket there.
I need a backlight for my monitor, otherwise the contrast just throws me off. Anne had tea ready when Marilla came home, and the fire was crackling cheerily. A vase of frost-bleached ferns and ruby red maple leaves adorned the table, and delectable odors of ham and toast pervaded the air. But Marilla sank into her chair with a deep sigh. Are your eyes troubling you? Does your head ache? Queried Anne anxiously. No, I'm only tired, worried. It's about Mary and those children. Mary's worse. She can't last much longer. As for the twins, I don't know what's become of them. Hasn't their uncle been heard from? Yes. Mary had a letter from him. He's working in a lumber camp and shacking it, whatever that means. Anyway, he says he can't possibly take the children till spring. He expects to be married then and will have a home to take them to, but he says she must get some of the neighbors to keep them for the winter. She says she can't bear to ask any of them. Mary never got on any too well with the East Grafton people, and that's a fact. And the long and short of it is, Anne, and I'm sure Mary wants me to take those children. He didn't say so, but she looked it. Oh! Anne clasped her hands with all a thrill with excitement. And of course you will, Marilla, but won't you? Haven't made up my mind, said Marilla rather tartly. I don't rush into things in your headlong way, Anne. Third cousinship is a pretty slim claim. It will be a fearful responsibility to have 2 children of 6 years to look after. Twins at that. Marilla had an idea that twins were just twice as bad as single children. It's very interesting, at least one pair of them, said Anne. It's only when there are 2 or 3 pairs that it gets monotonous, and I think it would be real nice for you to have something to amuse you when I'm away in school. I don't reckon there'd be much amusement in it. More worry and bother than anything else, I should say. I wouldn't be so risky if they were even as old as you were when I took you. I wouldn't mind Dora so much. She seems good and quiet. But that Davy is a limb.
Wow, tell us how you really feel, Marilla.
Twins are, by definition, twice as bad, according to Necromancer.
Oh my goodness, but twins are fun.
Anne was fond of children, and her heart yearned over the Keith twins. The remembrance of her own neglected childhood was very vivid within her. She knew that Marilla's only vulnerable point was her stern devotion to what she believed to be her duty, and Anne skillfully marshaled her arguments along this line. If Davy is not, it's all the more reason why he should have good training, isn't it, Marilla? If we don't take them, we don't know who will, nor what kind of influences may surround them. Suppose Mrs. Keith's next-door neighbors, the Sprots, were to take them. Mrs. Linda says Harry Sprott is the most profane man that ever lived, and you can't believe a word his children say. Wouldn't it be dreadful to have the twins learn anything like that? Or suppose they went to the Wiggins? Mrs. Lynde says that Mr. Wiggins sells everything off the place that can be sold and brings his family up on skim milk. Oh, my goodness. You wouldn't like your relations to be starved, even if they were only third cousins, would you? Seems to me, Marilla, that it is our duty to take them. Matsu, welcome, Matsu Kinox.
Matsu Kunox, welcome in. It's good to see you. I feel like I should shout Matsu out. It's really good to have you with us. Matsu's also a storytime streamer, so it's really good to have you with us. And boy, if you're not already familiar with him, I strongly recommend you do check him out. It's a good time.
I will do a courtesy shout out then. Is that slash shout out, right?
Yes, slash shout out space and then the username.
Okay. Always love a fellow storyteller. Did that work?
Necromancer just screaming his name in all caps. Love it.
Yeah, just spam the name in the chat. That's fine. Haven't read the book, so happy to listen. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. It's the sequel to Anne of Green Gables. So this is Anne when she's 16 years old and has become a school teacher.
We have lots of fun reading. Lots and lots of fun. It seems to me, Marilla, that it is our duty to take them. I suppose it is, assented Marilla gloomily. I dare say I'll tell Mary I'll take them. You needn't look so delighted, Anne. It'll mean a good deal of extra work for you. I can't sew a stitch on account of my eye, so you'll have to see to the making and mending of their clothes. And you don't like sewing. I hate it, said Anne calmly, but if you are willing to take those children from a sense of duty, surely I can do their sewing from a sense of duty. It does people good to have to do things they don't like. Moderation. I'll continue on with chapter 8. Any comments so far?
Oh my goodness, I didn't see twins coming into Anne's life this quickly. This is adorable.
I'm
And
ready
the
for
way
the...
she played Marilla like a fiddle.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
I tried to put the sauce on that line.
Very
Yeah,
well done.
I'm ready for the adorableness and the chaos that is about to ensue, I'm sure. Let me take a swig of water.
Good stuff.
You mentioned you had pizza earlier. What kind of pizza did you have?
So I kind of cheated a little with it. I just did cheese bread.
Oh, hey.
There's a little pizza place just around the corner from me, and so I popped over there, and they tend to do their cheese breads the same way that they do pizzas, which is to say they cut it into like little breadstick style strips.
Ooh.
So it's just this really nice layer of mozzarella cheese overlaid with what I suspect is a little bit of butter and garlic sauce, and then, you know, your standard bread. So it's nothing very fancy, but oh, it is so delicious.
That's savory, and I am salivating. I'm taking another swig of water.
Well, all right then. Good to know that the pizza has you hydrating. An important thing to do when you're going to be reading.
Chapter 8. Marilla adopts twins. Mrs. Rachel Lynde was sitting at her kitchen window, knitting a quilt, just as she had been sitting one evening several years previously when Matthew Cuthbert had driven down over the hill with what Mrs. Rachel called his imported orphan. But that had been in springtime, and this was late autumn, and all the woods were leafless, and the fields were sere and brown. Is that right, sere?
You know, I'm not familiar with that particular word. It looks like some variation of serene. But, or perhaps severe and brown?
Yeah.
Either way.
By the way, I didn't properly thank Matsu. Thank you for the follow.
Heck yeah.
The sun was just setting a great deal of purple and golden pomp behind the dark woods west of Avonlea when a buggy drawn by a comfortable brown nag came down the hill. Mrs. Rachel peered at it eagerly. "There's Marilla getting home from the funeral," she said to her husband, who was lying on the kitchen lounge. Thomas Lynde lay more on the lounge nowadays than he had been used to. But Mrs. Rachel, who was so sharp at noticing anything beyond her own household, had not as yet noticed this. "And she's got the twins with her. Yes, there's Davy leaning over the dashboard, grabbing at the pony's tail, and Marilla jerking him back. Or sitting up on the seat as prim as you please. She always looks as if she'd just been starched and ironed. Well, poor Marilla's going to have her hands full this winter, and no mistake. Still, I don't see that she could do anything less than take them, under the circumstances, and she'll have Anne to help her. Anne's tickled to death over the whole business, and she's a real knacky way with children, I must say. Dear me. Doesn't seem a day since poor Matthew brought Anne herself home, and everybody laughed at the idea of Marilla bringing up a child. And now she has adopted twins. You're never safe from being surprised till you're dead."
Oh my goodness.
The woman is getting back from a funeral. Come on. The fat pony jogged over the bridge in Lynn's Hollow. It has a name? I had no idea. And along the Green Gables Lane. Marilla's face was rather grim. It was 10 miles from East Grafton, and Davy Keith seemed to be possessed with a passion for perpetual motion. It was beyond Marilla's power to make him sit still, and she had been in agony the whole way lest he fall over the back of the wagon and break his neck, or tumble over the dashboard under the pony's heels. In despair, she finally threatened to whip him soundly when she got him home, whereupon Davy climbed into her lap, regardless of the reins, flung his chubby arms around her neck, and gave her a bear-like hug. "I don't believe you mean it," he said, smacking her wrinkled cheek affectionately. "You don't look like a lady who'd whip a little boy just 'cause he couldn't keep still. Didn't you find it awful hard to keep still when you was only as old as me?" "No, I always kept still when I was told," said Marilla, trying to speak sternly, albeit she felt her heart waxing soft within her under Davy's impulsive caresses. "Well, I suppose that was 'cause you was a girl," said Davy, squirming back to his place after another hug. "You was a girl once, I suppose, though it's awful funny to think of it. Dora can sit still, but there ain't much fun in it, I don't think. Seems to me it must be slow to be a girl. Here, Dora, let me liven you up a bit." Davy's method of livening up was to grasp Dora's curls in his fingers and give them a tug. That sounds familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Dora shrieked and then cried. "How could you be such a naughty boy and your poor mother just laid in her grave this very day?" demanded Marilla despairingly. "But she was glad to die," said Davy confidentially. "I know, 'cause she told me so. She was awful tired of being sick. We'd a long talk the night before she died. She told me you was going to take me and Dora for the winter, and I was going to be a good boy. I'm going to be good, but can't you be good running around just as well as sitting still? And she said I was always to be kind to Dora and stand up for her, and I'm going to." "You call pulling her hair being kind to her? Well, I ain't going to let anybody else pull it," said Davy, doubling up his fists and frowning. "They'd just better try it. I didn't hurt her much. You just cried 'cause she's a girl. I'm glad I'm a boy, but I'm sorry I'm a twin. When Jimmy Sprott's sister contradicts when Jimmy Sprott's sister contradicts him, he just says, 'I'm older than you, so of course I know better,' and that settles her. But I can't tell Dora that, and she just goes on thinking different from me. You might let me drive the Gigi for a spell since I'm a man." Altogether, Marilla was a thankful woman when she drove into her own yard, where the wind of the autumn night was dancing with the brown leaves. Anne was at the gate to meet them and lift the twins out. Dora submitted calmly to be kissed, but Davy responded to Anne's welcome with one of his hearty hugs and the cheerful announcement, "I'm Mr. Davy Keith." Necromancer, kick his butt!
Yeah, that talk with his mom is definitely going to mess him up a bit.
I'll go one more page and then I'll turn it over to you.
Alrighty.
At the supper table, Dora behaved like a little lady, but Davy's manners left much to be desired. "I'm so hungry. I ain't got time to eat politely," he said when Marilla reproved him. "Dora ain't half as hungry as I am. Look at all the excise I took on the road here. That cake's awful nice and plummy. We haven't had any cake at home ever so long, because Mother was too sick to make it. Mrs. Sprott said it was as much as she could do to bake our bread for us, and Mrs. Wiggins never puts any plums in her cakes. Catch her! Can I have another piece?" Marilla would have refused, but Anne had cut a generous second slice. However, she reminded Davy that he ought to say thank you for it. Davy merely grinned at her and took a huge bite. When he had finished the slice, he said, "If you give me another piece, I'll say thank you for it." "No, You have had plenty of cake, said Marilla in a tone which Anne knew, and Davy was to learn to be final. Davy winked at Anne, and then leaning over the table, snatched Dora's first piece of cake, from which she had just taken one dainty little bite out of her very fingers, and opening his mouth to the fullest extent, crammed the whole slice in. Dora's lips trembled, and Marilla was speechless with horror. Anne promptly exclaimed, with her best schoolma'am air, "Oh, Davy, gentlemen don't do things like that." I'll turn it over to you. Full Metal Alchemist.
Full Metal Alchemist. Oh, Davy, gentlemen don't do things like that. I know they don't, said Davy as soon as he could speak. But I ain't gentlemen. But don't you want to be? Said Anne, shocked. Of course I do, but you can't be a gentleman till you grow up. Oh, indeed you can, hastened Anne hastened to say, thinking she saw a chance to sow a good seed betimes. You can begin to be a gentleman when you are a little boy, and gentlemen never snatch things from ladies, or forget to say thank you, or pull anybody's hair. They don't have much fun, that's a fact, said Davy frankly. I guess I'll wait till I'm grown up to be one. Marilla, with a resigned air, had cut another piece of cake for Dora. She did not feel able to cope with Davy just then. It had been a hard day for her, what with the funeral and the long drive. At that moment she looked forward to the future with a pessimism that would have done credit to Eliza Andrews herself. The twins were not noticeably alike, although both were fair. Dora had long, sleek curls that never got out of order. Davy had a crop of fuzzy little yellow ringlets all around his head. Dora's hazel eyes were gentle and mild. Davy's were as roguish as a dancing elf. Dora's nose was straight, Davy's a positive snub. Dora had prunes and prisms mouth. Davy's was all smiles. And besides, he had a dimple in one cheek and none in the other, which gave him a dear, comical, lopsided look when he laughed. Mirth and mischief lurked in every corner of his little face. They'd better go to bed, said Marilla, who thought it was the easiest way to dispose of them. Dora will sleep with me, and you can put Davy in the west gable. You're not afraid to sleep alone, are you, Davy? No, but I ain't going to bed for ever so long yet, said Davy comfortably. Oh, yes, you are. That was all the much-tired Marilla said, but something in her tone squelched even Davy. He trotted obediently upstairs with Anne. When I'm grown up, the very first thing I'm going to do is stay up all night just to see what it would be like.
I remember being like that. Oh my goodness.
In after years, Marilla never thought of that first week of the twins' sojourn at Green Gables without a shiver. Not that it really was so much worse than the weeks that followed it, but it seemed so by reason of its novelty. There was seldom a waking moment of any day when Davy was not in mischief or devising it, but his first notable exploit occurred 2 days after his arrival. On Sunday morning, a fine, warm day as hazy and mild as September. Anne dressed him for church while Marilla attended to Dora. Davy at first objected strongly to having his face washed. Marilla washed it yesterday, and Mrs. Wiggins soured me with hard soap the day of the funeral. That's enough for 1 week. I don't see the good of being so awful clean. It's lots more comfortable being dirty. Paul Irving washes his face every day of his own accord, said Anne astutely. Davy had been an inmate of Green Gables for a little over 48 hours, but he already worshipped Anne and hated Paul Irving, whom he had heard Anne praising enthusiastically the day after his arrival. If Paul Irving washed his face every day, that settled it. He, Davy Keith, would do it too if it killed him. The same consideration induced him to submit meekly to the other details of his toilet, and he really was a handsome little lad when all was done. Anne felt an almost maternal pride in him as she led him into the old Cuthbert pew. Davy behaved quite well at first, being occupied in casting covert glances at all the small boys within view, and wondering which was Paul Irving. The first 2 hymns and the scripture reading passed off uneventfully. Mr. Allen was praying when the sensation came. Loretta White was sitting in front of Davy, her head slightly bent, and her fair hair hanging in 2 long braids, between which a tempting expanse of white neck showed, encased in a loose lace frill. Loretta was a fat, placid-looking child of 8, who had conducted herself irreproachably in church from the very first day her mother carried her there, an infant of 6 months. Davy thrust his hand into his pocket and produced a caterpillar, a furry, squirming caterpillar. Marilla saw and clutched at him, but she was too late. Davy dropped the caterpillar down Loretta's neck. Right into the middle of Mr. Allen's prayer burst a series of piercing shrieks. The minister stopped, appalled, and opened his eyes. Every head in the congregation flew up. Loretta White was dancing up and down in her pew, clutching frantically at the back of her dress. "Oh, Wilmer, ow, take it off. Ow, get it out. Ow, that bad boy put him on my neck. Ow, Wilmer, it's going further down. Ow, ow." Mrs. White rose, and with a set face, carried the hysterical, writhing Loretta out of church. Her shrieks died away in the distance, and Mr. Allen proceeded with the service, but everybody felt that it was a failure that day. For the first time in her life, Marilla took no notice of the text, and Anne sat with scarlet cheeks of mortification. When they got home, Marilla put Davy to bed and made him stay there the rest of the day. She would not give him any dinner, but allowed him a plain tea of bread and milk. Anne carried it to him and sat sorrowfully by him while he ate it, with an unrepentant relish. But Anne's mournful eyes troubled him. "I suppose," he said reflectively, "that Paul Irving wouldn't have dropped a caterpillar down a girl's neck in church, would he?" "Indeed, he wouldn't," said Anne sadly. "I'm kind of sorry I did it then," Davy concluded. "But it was such a jolly big caterpillar. I picked him up on the church steps just as we went in. Seemed a pity to waste him. And say, wasn't it fun to hear that girl yell?" Tuesday afternoon, the Aid Society met at Green Gables. Anne hurried home from school, for she knew that Marilla would need all the assistance she could give. Dora, neat and proper, in her nicely starched white dress and black sash, was sitting with the members of the Aid in the parlor, speaking demurely when spoken to, keeping silence when not, and in every way comporting herself as a model child. Davy, blissfully dirty, was making mud pies in the barnyard. "I told him he might," said Marilla wearily. "I thought it would keep him out of worse mischief. He can only get dirty at that. We'll have our teas over before we call him to his. Dora can have hers with us, but I would never dare to let Davy sit down at the table with all the aides here." When Anne went to call the aides to tea, she found that Dora was not in the parlor. Mrs. Jasper Bell said Davy had come to the front door and called her out. A hasty consultation with Marilla in the pantry resulted in a decision to let both children have their teas together later on. Tea was half over when the dining room was invaded by a forlorn figure. Marilla and Anne stared in dismay, the aides in amazement. Could that be Dora? That sobbing, nondescript and drenched-dripping dress and hair from which the water was streaming on Marilla's new coin-spot rug? "Dora, what has happened to you?" cried Anne with a guilty glance at Mrs. Jasper Bell, whose family was said to be the only one in the world in which accidents never occurred. "Davy made me walk the pig pen fence," wailed Dora. "I didn't want to, but he called me a free cat. And then he fell off into the pig pen. My dress got all dirty, and the pig run right over me. My dress was just awful, but Davy said if I'd stand under the pump, he'd wash it clean, and I did, and he pumped water all over me, but my dress ain't a bit cleaner, and my pretty sash and shoes is all spoiled."
Oh, man.
Anne did the honors of the table alone for the rest of the meal, while Marilla went upstairs and redressed Dora in her old clothes. Davy was caught and sent to bed without any supper. Anne went to his room at twilight and talked to him seriously, a method in which she had great faith, not altogether unjustified by results. She told him she felt very badly over his conduct. "I feel sorry now myself," admitted Davy. But the trouble is, I never feel sorry for doing things till after I've did 'em. Doyle wouldn't help me make pies 'cause she was afraid of messing her clothes, and that made me hoppin' mad. I suppose Paul Irving wouldn't have made his sister walk a pig-pen fence if he knew she'd fall in. No, he wouldn't dream of such a thing. Paul is a perfect little gentleman. Davy screwed his eyes tight shut and seemed to meditate on this for a time. Then he crawled up and put his arms about Anne's neck, snuggling his flushed little face down on her shoulder. We need to take Davy to the wizard. Maybe he can give the kid a brain and a heart. Whew, wow.
He's just a little mischievous.
Necromancer over here roasting a 6-year-old. Dang. Oh my goodness.
He's gonna be like Paul Irving one day, but he's gonna do it in his own way.
Well, Paul is a little bit older than Davy, isn't he?
That's true. I believe so.
And don't you like me a little bit, even if I ain't a good boy like Paul? Indeed I do, said Anne sincerely. Somehow it was impossible to help liking Davy, but I'd like you better still if you weren't so naughty. I did something else today, went on Davy in a muffled voice. I'm sorry now, but I'm awful scared to tell you. You won't be very cross, will you? And you won't tell Marilla, will you? I don't know, Davy. Perhaps I ought to tell her. But I think I can promise you I won't if you promise me that you'll never do it again. Whatever it is. No, I never will. Anyhow, it's not likely I'd find more of them this year. Found this one on the cellar steps. Davy, what is it you've done?
Oh, man.
I put a toad in Marilla's bed. You can go and take it out if you like, but say, Anne, wouldn't it be fun to leave it there? Davy Keith! Anne sprang from Davy's clinging arms and flew across the hall to Marilla's room. The bed was slightly rumpled. She threw back the blankets in nervous haste, and there, in very truth, was the toad, blinking at her from under a pillow. How can I carry that awful thing out? Moaned Anne with a shudder. The fire shovel suggested itself to her, and she crept down to get it while Marilla was busy in the pantry. Anne had her own troubles carrying that toad downstairs, for it had hopped off the shovel 3 times, and once she thought she had lost it in the hall. When she finally deposited it in the cherry orchard, she drew a long breath of relief. Marilla knew she'd never feel safe getting to bed in her life. I'm so glad that little sinner repented in time. There's Diana signaling to me from her window. I'm glad. I really feel the need of some diversion, for what with Anthony Pye in school and Davy Keith at home, my nerves have had about all they can endure for one day.
The old toad in the bed trick.
What do you mean old?
I don't know.
Sutil?
What do I mean?
Is there something that you meant to tell me?
No, I find it to be a practical old trick.
A practical old trick.
Mm-hmm. That's like something out like a Three Stooges. What I got.
Oh, well, all right then.
I think toads are cute.
Seriously, Sutil, frogs are way better, says Necromancer. I am not letting either of you make a bed for me now. My goodness.
What? I just think toads
Well,
are
apparently it's just an old trick.
I guess so.
Oh my goodness.
That's the impression I got.
I will also say the spelling in this book is just subtly off.
Yeah.
And it's throwing me so
There is
terribly.
something off about it, isn't it?
Well, it's using American spellings, and I'm like, what is this? No, stop.
Oh.
But it's like, well, all right, we'll roll with it.
I see.
So Necromancer says, if I made your bed, you'd most likely see my cats. Okay, fine, you're forgiven. Just no frogs.
Can you even stand the sight of a frog from afar?
I can stand the sight of a frog from afar. I have no intention of sharing my bed with one.
Well, me either. But I don't know. If I found a little guy in there, I'd kind of be like, oh, how'd you get here, man? That's all. I don't know.
Well, I am not sure.
But
what
then again, like, I
sensations
guess the way the trick works, right, is like you are so dead tired at the end of the day that you're not even looking at what your bed looks like and you're just flopping down. If you flop down on a toad, yeah, that's gonna give you a shock.
Well, and I suspect the toad won't appreciate it very much either.
No,
It's
and I
mean to
feel
the
very
toad, it's
bad
mean
for
to
the
person
toad.
who's flopping
Yes.
on it. And it's like, well, why would you want to leave that level of discomfort in people? I can't say.
Yeah.
Let's get you outside, bed frog, says Necromancer.
It's traumatic for the toad, traumatic for the person. You know, you're right. You're right.
My goodness.
Pretty silly.
Alright. Well, I'll continue on for here and
Sure.
probably do 2 more pages and then I'll sting you in and we'll go from there.
You got it.
Chapter 9. A Question of Color.
That old nuisance of a Rachel Linda was here again today.
No, what voice was I using for Mr. Harrison? I've forgotten. It's been far too long.
Yeah.
That old nuisance of a Rachel Linda was here today again, pestering me for a subscription towards buying a carpet for this vestry room,
said Mr. Harrison wrathfully.
I detest that woman more than anybody I know. She can put a whole sermon, text, comment, and application into 6 words and throw it at you like a brick.
Anne, who was perched on the edge of the veranda, enjoying the charm of a mild west wind blowing across a newly plowed field on a grey November twilight, and piping a quaint little melody among the twisted firs below the garden, turned her dreamy face over her shoulder. The trouble is, you and Mrs. Linda don't understand one another, she explained. That is always what is wrong when people don't like each other. I didn't like Mrs. Linda at first either, but as soon as I came to understand her, I learned to.
Mrs. Linda may be an acquired taste with some folks, but I didn't keep on eating bananas because I was told I'd learn to like them if I did,
growled Mr. Harrison.
And as for understanding her, I understand that she is a confirmed busybody, and I told her so.
Oh, that must have hurt her feelings very much, said Anne reproachfully. How could you say such a thing? I said some dreadful things to Mrs. Linda long ago, but that was when I had lost my temper. I couldn't say them deliberately.
It was the truth, and I believe in telling the truth to everybody.
You don't tell the whole truth. You only tell the disagreeable part of the truth. Now you've told me 12 times that my hair was red, but you've never once told me that I had a nice nose.
I dare say you know it without any telling,
chuckled Mr. Harrison. I know I have red hair too, although it's much darker than it used to be, so there's no need of telling me that either.
Oh, well, I'll try not to mention it again since you're so sensitive. You must excuse me, Anne. I've got a habit of being outspoken, and folks mustn't mind it.
But they can't help minding it, and I don't think it's any help that it's your habit. What would you think of a person who went about sticking pins and needles into people and saying,
"Excuse me, you mustn't mind it"?
It's just a habit I've got. Oh dear. Excuse me, you mustn't mind it. It's just a habit I've got. You'd think he was crazy, wouldn't you? And as for Mrs. Linda being a busybody, perhaps she is. But did you tell her she had a very kind heart and always helped the poor and never said a word when Timothy Cotton stole a crock of butter out of her dairy and told his wife he'd bought it from her? Mrs. Cotton cast it up to her next time they met, and it tasted of turnips, and Mrs. Linda said she was sorry it had turned out so poorly.
I suppose she has some good qualities,
conceded Mr. Harrison grudgingly.
Most folks have. I've some myself, though you might never suspect it. But anyhow, I ain't going to give you anything to that carpet. Folks are everlasting begging for money here, it seems to me. How's your project of painting the hall coming on?
Splendidly. We had a meeting of the AVIS last Friday night and found that we had plenty of money subscribed to paint in the hall and shingle the roof, too. Most people gave very liberally, Mr. Harrison. Full Metal Alchemist.
Full Metal Alchemist. Anne was a sweet-souled lass, but she could instill some venom into innocent italics when the occasion acquired. What color are you going to have it? We've decided on a very pretty green. The roof will be dark red, of course. Mr. Roger Pye is going to get the paint in town today. Who's got the job? Mr. Joshua Pye of Carmody. He has nearly finished the shingling. We have to give him the contract for every one of the pies. And there are 4 families, you know. Said they wouldn't give a cent unless Joshua got it. They had subscribed $12 between them, and we thought that was too much to lose, although some people think we shouldn't have given in to the pies. Mrs. Linda says they try to run everything. Main question is, will this Joshua do his work well? If he does, I don't see that it matters whether his name is Pie or Pudding. He has a reputation of being a good workman, though they say he's a very peculiar man. He hardly ever talks. He's peculiar enough, all right, then, said Mr. Harrison dryly. Or at least, folks here will call him so. I never was much of a talker till I came to Avonlea, and I had to begin in self-defense, or Mrs. Linda would have said I was dumb and started a subscription to have me taught sign language. You're not going yet, Anne. I must. I must. I have some sewing to do for Dora this evening. Besides, Davy's probably breaking Marilla's heart with some new mischief by this time. This morning the first thing he said was, "Where's the dart go, Anne? I want to know." I told him it went around the other side of the world, but after breakfast he declared it didn't, that it went down the well. Marilla says she caught him hanging over the well box 4 times today, trying to reach down to the dark. He's a limb, declared Mr. Harrison. He came over here yesterday and pulled 6 feathers out of Ginger's tail before I could get him. Oh my goodness. Now the bird? He came over here yesterday and pulled 6 feathers out of Ginger's tail before I could get in from the barn. Poor bird has been moping ever since. Those children must be a side of trouble to you folks. Everything that's worth having is some trouble, said Anne, secretly resolving to forgive Davy's next offense, whatever it might be, since he had avenged her on Ginger. Vengeance! Mr. Roger Pye brought the hall paint home that night, and Mr. Joshua Pye, a surly, taciturn man, began painting the next day. He was not disturbed in this task. The hall was situated on what was called the Lower Road. In late autumn, this road was always muddy and wet, and people going to Carmody traveled by the longer Upper Road. The hall was so closely surrounded by fir woods that it was invisible unless you were near it. Mr. Joshua Pye painted away in the solitude and independence that were so dear to his unsociable heart. Friday afternoon, he finished his job and went home to Carmody. Soon after his departure, Mrs. Rachel Linda drove by, having braved the mud of the Lower Road out of curiosity to see what the hall looked like in its new coat of paint. When she rounded the spruce curve, she saw. The sight affected Mrs. Linda oddly. She dropped the reins, held up her hands, and said, "Gracious Providence!" She stared as if she could not believe her eyes. Then she laughed almost hysterically. There must be some mistake. There must. I knew those pies would make a mess of things. Mrs. Linda drove home, meeting several people on the road and stopping to tell them about the hall. The news flew like wildfire. Gilbert Blythe, poring over a textbook at home, heard it from his father's hired boy at sunset. and rushed breathlessly to Green Gables, joined on the way by Fred Wright. They found Diana Barry, Jane Andrews, and Anne Shirley, despair personified, at the yard gate of Green Gables, under the big, leafless willows.
Oh no, what happened?
"It isn't true, surely, Anne?" exclaimed Gilbert. "It is true," answered Anne, looking like the muse of tragedy. "Mrs. Linda called on her way from Carmody to tell me. It is simply dreadful. What is the use of trying to improve anything?" "What is dreadful?" asked Oliver Sloane, arriving at this moment with the bandbox he had brought from town for Marilla. "Haven't you heard?" sang Jane wrathfully. "Well, it is simply this. Joshua Pye has gone and painted the hall blue instead of green. A deep, brilliant blue, the shade they use for painting carts and wheelbarrows. And Mrs. Lynde says it is the most hideous color for a building, especially when combined with a red roof, that she ever saw or imagined. You could simply have knocked me down with a feather when I heard it. It's heartbreaking, after all the trouble we've had." "How on earth could such a mistake have happened?" wailed Diana. The blame of this unmerciful disaster was eventually narrowed down to the Pyes. The improvers had decided to use Morton Harris paints, and the Morton Harris paint cans were numbered according to a color card. The purchaser chose his shade on the card and ordered by the accompanying number. Number 147 was the shade of greed desired, and when Mr. Roger Pye sent word to the improvers by his son, John Andrew, that he was going to town and would get their paint for them, the improvers told John Andrew to tell his father to get 147. John Andrews always averred
Always averred that he did so.
Okay. John Andrew always averred that he did so. But Mr. Roger Pye as stanchly declared that John Andrew told him 157. And there the matter stands to this day. That night, there was a blank dismay in every Avonlea house where an improver lived. Gloom at Green Gables was so intense that it quenched even Davy. Anne wept and would not be comforted. "I must cry even if I'm almost 17, Marilla," she sobbed. "It is so mortifying, and it sounds the death knell of our society. It will simply be laughed out of existence." In life, as in dreams, however, things often go by contraries. The Avonlea people did not laugh. They were too angry. Their money, had gone to paint the hall, and consequently, they felt themselves bitterly aggrieved by the mistake. Public indignation centered on the Pyes. Roger Pye and John Andrew had bungled the matter between them, and as for Joshua Pye, he must be a born fool not to suspect there was something wrong when he opened the cans and saw the color of the paint. Joshua Pye, thus when this is a new word. Animadverted, yes. Joshua Pye, when thus animadverted upon, retorted that the Avonlea taste in colors was no business of his, whatever his private opinion might be. He had been hired to paint the hall, not to talk about it, and he meant to have his money for it. The improvers paid him his money in bitterness of spirit, after consulting Mr. Peter Sloane, who was a magistrate. "You'll have to pay it," Peter told him. "You can't hold him responsible for the mistake, since he claims he was never told what the color was supposed to be, but just given the cans and told to go ahead. But it's a burning shame that hall certainly does look awful." The luckless improvers expected that Avonlea would be more prejudiced than ever against them. But instead, public sympathy veered around in their favor. People thought the eager, enthusiastic little band who had worked so hard for their object had been badly used. Mrs. Linda told them to keep on and show the Pyes that there really were people in the world who could do things without making a muddle of them.
quite the roast.
Yeah. Mr. Major Spencer sent them word that he would clean out all the stumps along the road front of his farm and seed it down with grass at his own expense. And Mrs. Hiram Sloane said, and Mrs. Hiram Sloane called at the school one day and beckoned Anne mysteriously out into the porch to tell her that if the society wanted to make a geranium bed at the crossroads in the spring, they needn't be afraid of her cow, for she would see that the marauding animal was kept within safe bounds. Even Mr. Harrison chuckled. He chuckled at all in private, and was all sympathy outwardly. Never mind, Anne. Most paints fade uglier every year, but that blue's as ugly as it can be to begin with, so it's bound to fade prettier. And the roof is shingled and painted all right. Folks will be able to sit in the hall after this without being leaked on. You've accomplished so much anyhow. But Avonlea's Blue Hall will be a byword in the neighboring settlements from this time out, said Anne bitterly. And it must be confessed that it was.
Oh my goodness. Well, unmitigated disasters do seem to follow Anne around.
No
Whether
matter
it's a
the
cow
best
or a
intentions,
sky blue
yeah.
hall.
That's just what happens.
Do you want to go for another chapter here?
Let's do
or-
one more.
How are you
Yeah.
doing?
I'll continue on
Alright.
for a little bit, and then I'll switch it over maybe after 3-4 pages.
Alright, sounds like a plan.
Chapter 10. Davy in Search of a Sensation. Anne, walking home from school through the birch path one November afternoon, felt convinced afresh that life was a very wonderful thing. The day had been a good day. All had gone well in her little kingdom. St. Clair Donnell had not fought any of the other boys over the question of his name. Billy Rogerson's face had been so puffed up from the effects of a toothache that she did not once try to coquette with the boys in her vicinity. Barbara Shaw had met with only one accident, spilling a dipper of water over the floor. And Anthony Pye had not been in school at all. Good, I guess.
Dear. Worrying, but okay.
Yeah. What a nice month this November has been, said Anne, who had never quite got over her childish habit of talking to herself. November is usually such a disagreeable month. As if the year had suddenly found out that she was growing old and could do nothing but weep and fret over it. This year is growing old gracefully. Just like a stately old lady who knows she can be charming even with her gray hair and wrinkles. We've had lovely days and delicious twilights. This last fortnight has been so peaceful. Even Davy has been almost well behaved. I really think he is improving a great deal. How quiet the woods are today. Not a murmur except that soft wind purring in the treetops. It sounds like surf on a faraway shore. How dear the woods are. You beautiful trees, I love every one of you as a friend. Anne paused to throw her arm about a slim young birch and kissed its cream-white trunk. Diana, rounding a curve in the path, saw her and laughed. Anne Shirley, you're only pretending to be grown up. I believe when you're alone, you're as much a little girl as you ever were. Well, one can't get over the habit of being a little girl all at once, said Anne gaily. You see, I was little for 14 years, and I've only been grown-uppish for scarcely 3. I'm sure I shall always feel like a child in the woods. These walks from school are almost the time. These walks home from school are almost the only time I have for dreaming, except the half hour or so before I go to sleep. I'm so busy with teaching and studying and helping Marilla with the twins that I haven't another moment for imagining things. You don't know what splendid adventures I have for a little while after I go to bed in the east gable every night. I can relate to this, actually. I always imagine I'm something very brilliant and triumphant and splendid. A great prima donna, or a Red Cross nurse, or a queen. Last night I was a queen. It's really splendid to imagine you are a queen. You have all the fun of it without any of the inconveniences, and you can stop being a queen whenever you want to, which you couldn't in real life. But here in the woods, I like best to imagine quite different things. I'm a dryad, living in an old pine, or a little brown wood elf hiding under a crinkled leaf. That white birch you caught me kissing is a sister of mine. The only difference is she's a tree and I'm a girl, but that's no real difference. Where are you going, Diana? Down to the Dixons. I promised to help Alberta cut out her new dress. Can't you walk down in the evening, Anne, and come home with me? I might, since Fred Ward is away in town, said Anne with a rather too insolent face. Diana blushed, tossed her head, and walked on. She did not look offended, however. Anne fully intended to go down to the Dixons that evening, but she did not. When she arrived at Green Gables, she found a state of affairs which banished every other thought from her mind. Marilla met her in the yard. A wild-eyed Marilla. Full Metal Alchemist.
Full Metal Alchemist. Anne, Dora is lost! Dora? Lost! Anne looked at Davy, who was swinging on the yard gate, and detected merriment in his eyes. Davy, do you know where she is? No, I don't, said Davy stoutly. I haven't seen her since dinner time, cross my heart. I've been away ever since 1 o'clock. Thomas Linda took sick all of a sudden, and Rachel sent up for me to go at once. When I left here, Dora was playing with her doll in the kitchen, and Davy was making mud pies behind the barn. I only got home half an hour ago, and no Dora to be seen. Davy declares he never saw her since I left. Neither I did, avowed Davy solemnly. She must be somewhere around. She would never wander far away alone. You know how timid she is. Perhaps she has fallen asleep in one of the rooms. Marilla shook her head. I've hunted the whole house through, but she may be in some of the buildings. A thorough search followed. Every corner of the house, yard, and outbuildings was ransacked by those two distracted people. Anne roved the orchards and the haunted wood, calling Dora's name. Marilla took a candle and explored the cellar. Davy accompanied each of them in turn, and was fertile in thinking of places where Dora could possibly be. Finally, they met again in the yard. That's a most mysterious thing, groaned Marilla. Where can she be? Said Anne miserably. Maybe she's tumbled into the well, suggested Davy cheerfully. Anne and Marilla looked fearfully into each other's eyes. The thought had been with them both through the entire search, but neither had dared to put it into words. She might have, whispered Marilla. Anne, feeling faint and sick, went to the well box, peered over. The bucket sat on the shelf inside. Far down below was a tiny glimmer of still water. The Cuthbert well was the deepest in Avonlea. If Dora... But Anne could not face the idea. She shuddered and turned away. Run across for Mr. Harrison, said Marilla, wringing her hands. Mr. Harrison and John Henry are both away. They went to town today. I'll go for Mr. Barry. Mr. Barry came back with Anne, carrying a coil of rope to which was attached a claw-like instrument that had been the business end of a grubbing fork. Marilla and Anne stood by, cold and shaken with horror and dread, while Mr. Barry dragged the well, and Davy, astride the gate, watched the group with a face indicative of huge enjoyment. Finally, Mr. Barry shook his head with a relieved air.
She can't be down there. It's a mighty curious thing where she could have got to, though. Look here, young man, are you sure you've no idea where your sister went?
I told you a dozen times I haven't, said Davy with an injured air. Maybe a tramp come and stole her. Nonsense, said Marilla sharply, relieved from her horrible fear of the well. And do you suppose she could have strayed over to Mr. Harrison's? She has always been talking about his parrot ever since that time you took her over. I can't believe Dora would venture so far alone, but I'll go over and see. Nobody was looking at Davy just then, or it would have been seen that a very decided change came over his face. He quietly slipped off the gate and ran, as fast as his fat legs could carry him, to the barn. Anne hastened across the fields to the Harrison establishment in no very hopeful frame of mind. The house was locked, the window shades were down, and there was no sign of anything living about the place. She stood on the veranda and called Dora loudly. Ginger, in the kitchen behind her, shrieked and swore with sudden fierceness, but between his outbursts Anne heard a plaintive cry from the little building in the yard, which served Mr. Harrison as a tool house. Anne flew to the door, unhasped it, and caught up a small mortal with a tear-stained face who was sitting forlornly on an upturned nail keg. "Oh, Dora, what a fright you have given us! How came you to be here?" "Davy and I came over to see Ginger," sobbed Dora. "But we couldn't see him after all, only Davy made me swear by kicking the door. And then Davy brought me here and run out and shut the door, and I couldn't get out. I cried and cried. I was frightened and I'm so hungry and cold. I thought you'd never come, Anne." "Davy!" But Anne could say no more. She carried Dora home with a heavy heart. Her joy at finding the child safe and sound was drowned out in the pain caused by Davy's behavior. The freak of shutting Dora up might easily have been pardoned, but Davy had told falsehoods, downright cold-blooded falsehoods about it. That was the ugly fact, and Anne could not shut her eyes to it. She could have sat down and cried with sheer disappointment. She had grown to love Davy dearly, how dearly she had not known until this minute, and it hurt her unbearably to discover that he was guilty of deliberate falsehood. Marilla listened to Anne's tale in a silence that boded no good Davy-ward. Mr. Barry laughed and advised that Davy be summarily dealt with. When he had gone home, Anne soothed and warmed the sobbing, shivering Dora, got her supper, and put her to bed. Then she returned to the kitchen just as Marilla came grimly in, leading, or rather pulling, the reluctant, cobwebby Davy, whom she had just found hidden away in the darkest corner of the stable. She jerked him to the mat in the middle of the floor, then went and sat down by the east window. Anne was sitting limply by the west window. Between them stood the culprit. His back was toward Marilla, and it was a meek, subdued, frightened back. But his face was toward Anne, and although it was a little shamefaced, there was a gleam of comradeship in Davy's eyes, as if he knew he had done wrong and was going to be punished for it, but could count on a laugh over it all with Anne later on. But no half-hidden smile answered him in Anne's gray eyes, as there might have done had it been only a question of mischief. There was something else, something ugly and repulsive. "How could you behave so, Davy?" she asked sorrowfully. Davy squirmed uncomfortably. "I just did it for fun. Things have been so awful quiet here for so long, I thought it would be fun to give you folks a big scare. It was, too." In spite of fear and a little remorse, Davy grinned over the recollection. "But you told a falsehood about it, Davy," said Anne, more sorrowfully than ever. Davy looked puzzled. "What's a falsehood? You mean a whopper?" "I mean a story that was not true." "Of course I did. If I hadn't, you wouldn't have been scared. I had to tell it." Anne was feeling the reaction from her fright and exertions. Davy's impenitent attitude gave the finishing touch. 2 big tears brimmed up in her eyes. "Oh, Davy, how could you?" she said with a quiver in her voice. "Don't you know how wrong it was?" Davy was aghast. Anne was crying. He had made Anne cry. A flood of real remorse rolled like a wave over his warm little heart and engulfed it. He rushed to Anne, hurled himself into her lap, flung his arms around her neck, and burst into tears. "What was wrong to tell Whoppers? How do you expect me to know it was wrong? All Mr. Spout's children told him regular every day, and crossed their hearts, too. I suppose Paul Irving never tells Whoppers here, and I've been trying awful hard to be as good as him, but now I suppose you'll never love me again. But I think you might have told me it was wrong. I'm awful sorry I've made you cry, and I'll never tell Whopper again." Davy buried his face in Anne's shoulder and cried stormily. Anne, in a sudden glad flash of understanding, held him tight and looked over his curly thatch at Marilla. "He didn't know it was wrong to tell falsehoods, Marilla. I think we must forgive him for that part of this time. He'll promise never to say what isn't true again." "I never will, now that I know it's bad," asserted Davy between sobs. "If you catch me telling Whopper again, you can..." Davy groped mentally for suitable penance. "You can skin me alive, Anne." "Don't say Whopper, Davy. Say falsehood," said the schoolma'am. "Why?" queried Davy, settling comfortably down and looking up with a tear-stained, investigating face. "Why ain't a Whopper as good as a falsehood? I want to know. It's just a bigger word." "It's slang, and it's wrong for little boys to use slang." "There's an awful lot of things it's wrong to do," said Davy with a sigh. "I never supposed there was so many. I'm sorry it's wrong to tell falsehoods, 'cause it's awful handy, but since it is, I'm never going to tell any more. What are you going to do to me for telling this time? I want to know." Anne looked beseechingly at Marilla. "I don't want to be too hard on the child," said Marilla. "I dare say nobody ever did tell him it was wrong to tell lies, and those Sprott children were no fit companions for him. Poor Mary was too sick to train him properly, and I presume you couldn't expect a 6-year-old child to know things like that by instinct. I suppose we'll just have to assume he doesn't know anything right and begin at the beginning. But he'll have to be punished for shutting Dora up, and I can't think of any way except to send him to bed without his supper, and we've done that so often. Can't you suggest something else, Anne? I should think you ought to be able to, with that imagination you're always talking of." Wow, there's a callback.
Mm-hmm.
"But punishments are so horrid, and I only like to imagine pleasant things," said Anne, cuddling Davy. "There's so many unpleasant things in this world already that there's no use in imagining any more." In the end, Davy was sent to bed as usual, there to remain until noon the next day. He evidently did some thinking, for when Anne went up to her room a little later, she heard him calling her name softly. Going in, she found him sitting up in bed, with his elbows on his knees and his chin propped on his hands. "Anne, is it wrong for everybody to tell falsehoods? I want to know." "Yes, indeed." "Is it wrong for a grown-up person?" "Yes." "Then Marilla is bad, for she tells them. She's worse than me, for I didn't know it was wrong, but she does." "Davy Keith, Marilla never told a story in her life," said Anne indignantly. "She did so. She told me last Tuesday something dreadful would happen to me if I didn't say my prayers every night. I ain't said 'em for over a week just to see what would happen. And nothing has," concluded Davy in an aggrieved tone. Anne choked back a mad desire to laugh with the conviction that it would be fatal, and then earnestly set about saving Marilla's reputation. "Why, Davy Keith, something dreadful has happened to you this very day." Davy looked skeptical. "I suppose you mean being sent to bed without any supper, but that isn't dreadful. Of course I don't like it, but I've been sent to bed so much since I come here that I'm getting used to it. And you don't save anything by making me go without supper either, for I always eat twice as much for breakfast." "I don't mean you're being sent to bed. I mean the fact that you told a falsehood today. And Davy," Anne leaned over the footboard of the bed and shook her finger impressively at the culprit, "for a boy to tell what isn't true is almost the worst thing that could happen to him. Almost the very worst. So you see, Marilla told you the truth." But I thought something bad would be something exciting, protested Davy in an injured tone. Marilla isn't to blame for what you thought. Bad things aren't always exciting. They're very often just nasty and stupid. It was awful funny to see Marilla and you looking down the well, though, said Davy, hugging his knees. Anne kept a sober face until she got downstairs, and then collapsed on the sitting room lounge and laughed until her sides ached. If only you'd tell me the joke, said Marilla a little grimly. I haven't seen much to laugh at today. You'll laugh when you hear this, assured Anne, and Marilla did laugh, which showed how much her education had advanced since the adoption of Anne. But she sighed immediately after. I suppose I shouldn't have told him that, although I heard a minister say it to a child once. But he did aggravate me so. It was the night you were at the Carmody concert, and I was putting him to bed. He said he didn't see the good of praying until he got big enough to be of some importance to God. And I do not know what we are going to do with that child. I never saw his beat. I'm feeling clean discouraged. Oh, don't say that, Marilla. Remember how bad I was when I came here? Anne, you were never bad. Never. I see that now when I've learned what real badness is. You were always getting into terrible scrapes, I'll admit, but your motive was always good. Davy is just bad from the sheer love of it. No, I don't think it is real badness with him either. It's just mischief. And it is rather quiet for him up here, you know. He has no other boys to play with, and his mind has to have something to occupy it. Dora is so prim and proper, she's no good for a boy's playmate. I really think it would be better to let them go to school, Marilla. No. My father always said that no child should be cooped up in the four walls of a school until it was 7 years old, and Mr. Allen says the same thing. The twins can have a few lessons at home, but go to school they shan't till they're 7. Well, we must try to reform Davy at home, then, said Anne cheerfully. With all his faults, he's really a dear little chap. I can't help loving him. Marilla, it may be a dreadful thing to say, but honestly, I like Davy better than Dora, for all she's so good. I don't know, but I do myself, confessed Marilla. And it isn't fair, for Dora isn't a bit of trouble. There couldn't be a better child, and you'd hardly know she was in the house. Dora is too good. She'd behave just as well if there wasn't a soul to tell her what to do. She was born already brought up, so she doesn't need us, I think, concluded Anne, hitting on a very vital truth. That we always love the best people who need us. Davy needs us badly. He certainly needs something, agreed Marilla. Rachel Lynde would say it was a good spanking. And I think Necromancer would agree. But I thought something bad would be exciting. Davy, no, you're not a teen yet. You can't think like that. You can think like that when you're older, says Necromancer. Necromancer, don't go corrupting the youths. Why would you do this?
I think Davy just needs the right environment and the right care to express himself in a good way.
Davy needs a good male role model. Somebody who can help him see that it isn't manly or charming to be rude, unkind, or cruel, but rather that being somebody who can be relied upon, somebody strong and civil, helpful, willing to be more than just a person who's present. That's what really would be appropriate.
Yeah.
How are you holding up?
I am good, but I think I'm all tuckered out for today with reading. I really needed this, so thank you for agreeing to do this with me.
Oh, of course. It's always a delight to get a chance to spend time with you here.
Yay. I hope we do it much sooner rather than later.
I would strongly agree. Cecile,
Yeah.
thank you for reaching out and encouraging me to do this with you tonight, organizing everything. I really appreciate it. Chad, it was wonderful seeing you. I hope you've had a wonderful time with our reading here tonight.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your presence.
Indeed. Is the plan a raid from here? Is the plan a switch over to something else? What are we
Let's
looking
see. Yeah, I'm gonna find a raid target, and if I can't find one, I will ask you.
at? Sounds like a plan.
Let's see. I'll ask you for a raid target.
Oh dear, I have a target-rich environment on my end. Let's see. Do you want to stick with the writing and reading, or do you want something a little more active for folks here?
I think story time will be nice.
So let me narrow that down to story time then. So, I do see one in my list here. Let me toss the username to you over our Discord conversation.
That's
And
exactly
you
what I was
decide
gonna
from
suggest.
there.
Okay. We are rating Lady Winter Author. What is Lady Winter Author up to, Celine?
Well, at least the category for tonight seems to be reading and writing.
Alright.
And, from the looks of it, there's spirit sessions going on in the background, so it's a Pomodoro timer. So my guess is it's more on the writing side tonight than it is on the reading.
Cool. Alright. Everybody have a relaxing good time. And yeah, have a good evening.
Until
have a good
next
weekend. I
time.
don't know if I'll be on this weekend. But I do want to get back into, Necromancer reminded me of it because I was doing Legend of Grimrock earlier. And that's a good old dungeon crawl, right? So.
Well, we'll have to get into Phantasy Star Online one of these days, too.
Oh, yes, that's true. You know, just before we're raiding out here, I've been trying out Ultima Online. And that's been a real
Ultima.
interesting experience. So maybe I'll tell you as I get further into it. I'm just at the beginnings here.
You'll have to toss me a link.
Yes. Yeah, I could give you an invite to that server for sure.
Well, in the meanwhile, thank you everybody for joining in. Until next time, I'll be waiting.
Later, and have a good evening. Raiding now.